Hi, welcome to Grammar with Clarity for everyone. This is the 10th lesson in this series. At this point, we have moved into learning about comma rules. This lesson is going to focus on when using commas in compound and complex sentences. So this should be very easy for you because we've already learned about compound and complex sentences. And while we were learning about them, we had to use the commas correctly. So this is just simply restating what we've already learned. Please don't skip it because there is another aspect of compound sentences that I did not include in the original lesson because I did not want to overwhelm everybody. So I pulled it into this one, and it's another style of compound sentence, which I would like you to please, I need you to learn it and own it and feel confident with it because it's a very mature way of developing a compound sentence. Okay, so with that, we'll get started. You need to have college ruled notebook paper. For this lesson, we will have, I think we'll just have one sheet of college ruled notebook paper. You're going to need your dark blue colored pencil, your red colored pencil, orange, green, and purple, please. Okay, let's get started. All right, this is going to be the 10th lesson. So we're going to go ahead and write commas and then compound and complex sentences. All right, so first we're going to start out with just a quick review of what a compound sentence is. So we're going to first put our heading of compound sentences. Okay, so as you remember, we need to place a comma between our independent clauses. So we're going to just go ahead and write use a comma between independent clauses, but we don't want to forget our coordinating conjunctions. Okay, so we're going to just do a quick remembering of that. So we're going to do boy and then come over here, fans. And at this point, you should be pretty good at filling this in. So go ahead and fill this in. Okay, so B is but. We've got or, yet, for, and, nor, and so. We're going to go ahead and put our box around our coordinating conjunctions. All right, so what does it look like when we do this with a coordinating conjunction? Well, it looks like this. We have our independent clause, our comma, our coordinating conjunction, and then our second independent clause and a period. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and color code this. Remember that our coordinating conjunctions, we are using orange for that. Okay, and we're using green in our comma rules for our comma. We want to make it really big and kind of obnoxious, right? And then independent clauses, compound sentences, as you remember, are developed with two or more independent clauses. Okay, so that's the sentence frame for a compound sentence. Must have that comma. Now we're going to talk about the new type of compound sentence. So we're going to come down a couple of lines and you're going to write new type of compound sentence. You're going to go ahead and underline this. Okay. Now, this new type of compound sentence is going to be one that where we have an independent clause, and then we have a semicolon. And then we have not a coordinating conjunction, but we have what we call a conjunctive adverb. So we're going to do a really long squiggle, okay, for the conjunctive adverb. And then we have a comma, and then we have another independent clause. All right, so let's color code this. We're going to, well, actually, first, let's make a list of conjunctive adverbs. So we're going to come down a couple of lines. And we're just going to write 6. There's a lot of them, but we're just going to write 6 that are commonly used in this type of sentence. So the first one is however, and then as a result, and then furthermore. Then we're going to come over here and start another column, consequently. These are actually really fun to make sentences with. Alternatively, and nevertheless. Okay, then we're going to go ahead and put a box around these guys. Let's go up here and let's just put a little note that these are coordinating conjunctions. So we'll just kind of draw an arrow and we'll write coordinating. Conjunctions. So we don't get confused as to what's going on here. Okay, especially since we're pulling in a whole different squiggle situation here. All right, so I wanted you to have purple, and do I have purple? I do. Okay, so we're going to color code these with purple. So go ahead and put purple around your box. It's really kind of obvious. All right, and then we're going to go over our squiggle in purple. I'm also going to have you go over your semicolon in purple, okay? Because it's directly tied to one of these words, these conjunctive adverbs. But then our comma, because in this set of comma rules, this whole series, we're just making the commas green. We're just kind of sticking with that. And the other thing to remember is that we're still talking about compound sentences here. So that means that this is an independent clause and this is an independent clause, right? We probably should go ahead and write that. I forgot to have us write it up here. Let's go ahead and go back up. I'm sorry with all this backing up. Let's write independent clause. And remember, independent clause means a standalone sentence, all right? It works all by itself. Okay, and then again, both of these are independent clauses. All right, go ahead and get that written. Now, we're going to do some examples. Oh, let's turn our paper over to the side here and let's write, this is a type of compound sentence. Just as a reminder, we'll put a star and we'll write, this is a type of compound sentence. Okay, just as a quick reminder. So let's have an example. So we're going to, oh, first, actually, I want us to identify that these are conjunctive adverbs. So let's write that down here. Okay. Let's go over that in purple. Okay, now here's a first example. Jenny was a strong student. Okay, so here we have our independent clause. The next thing we're going to write is, however, she suffered from severe test anxiety. So Jenny was a strong student, semicolon. However, comma, she suffered from severe test anxiety. Okay, now let's color code this. So let's go ahead and start with our independent clauses. So Jenny was a strong student. We know that is an independent clause. We're going to underline that. Here we have our semicolon, separating the two independent clauses. Okay, so semicolon, and then we have our conjunctive adverb, however. So we're going to write however in purple. All right, and then our comma, of course, we're going to make that green. And I want to point out too, this is lowercase h here, okay? And then she suffered from severe test anxiety is another independent clause. So this is a new type of compound sentence. So we talked about you creating compound sentences and connecting them with only a semicolon. Yes, we did. And they definitely need to directly correlate with each other. This is a more advanced version of that type of compound sentence, okay? If you can start to write these, wow, I'm going to be impressed. You should be impressed. Your parents should be impressed. These are the ones to aim for. These are pretty fun. Okay. We're going to do one more example. All right. Bryce grew up in Alaska. Semicolon. And then we're going to use as a result. Comma. He loves the snow and the mountains. Period. All right, so go ahead and color code it. I bet at this point you can color code it without me even saying anything, but feel free to look up here if you need to. Okay, first I identified my two independent clauses. Now I'm going to go ahead and say, oh, here's my comma, make that nice and green and heavy. And then here's my conjunctive adverb as a result. I'm going to go over that with my purple. So that sticks out. And of course, my semicolon, I'm going to make that purple. Okay, so those are our two examples there. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and do an arrow to the back because we still haven't reminded ourselves about where do we put those commas with complex sentences. So we're just going to flip it to the back and write complex sentences. Okay, so the general rule with a complex sentence is that we need to figure out, okay, this is like what we have to do. One, we need to find the independent clause. If we can find the independent clause, and if there is something happening before the independent clause and it is a dependent clause, then we know that we have to separate the two with a comma. Okay, so find the independent clause and then two, place the comma in front of it. Okay, the other thing that I want to talk about is basically, if we, let's see, grab my notes here from complex sentence structure. I want to remind you that there are many, this is just the page of notes that we recently did when we learned about complex sentence structure, but we only had 3 sentence frames for complex sentences. Complex sentences can get much longer. They can become more varied. Notice that in one of these, we actually have 2 commas because we inserted the dependent clause right into it. In this one, we only have 1 because here we have the independent clause. The dependent clause is in front of it, so we put the comma in front of the independent clause, or we could say we put it after the dependent clause. Here, we put the independent clause first, and then we're separating the dependent clause from that with a comma. This is not always the case, okay? And there are, so this will take us to a separate rule where we talk about restrictive and non-restrictive elements will help with this, but this is, again, this is not always the case. So we want to be very careful that we are using commas to separate between the 2 types of clauses. Okay. Okay, so I have an example here from 7th grade IXL. So this one is asking to correct the text by inserting 1 comma. All right, so this is an example of where I was talking about finding the independent clause and then putting the comma in front of it. So first we're going to read the entire sentence. Before the Pentagon signed a 2013 order allowing women to serve in all ground combat military positions, women in combat zones could only fill support positions. All right, so what we need to do is determine where in this sentence we have our independent clause. So I'll give you a second to read it and see if you can determine what part of this is our independent clause. Okay, so here it is. It starts with women. Women in combat zones could only fill support positions. That would be our independent clause. So we would want to put a comma right here separating the dependent clause from that. So let's read it with that comma there. Before the Pentagon signed a 2013 order allowing women to serve in all ground combat military positions, women in combat zones could only fill support positions. So when we have that natural pause there separating the dependent part of our sentence from the independent part, it does make more sense. All right, so your practice path for this lesson, if you are in 7th grade, it is MM2, 8th grade NN2, 9th grade HH3, 10th grade HH3, 11th grade CC3, and 12th grade CC3. Okay, I would like you to do a minimum of 20 of these, okay? Minimum of 20, it's always correct. So that number is always counted as correct, okay? Not half of them wrong and then calling it good. Okay, thanks for watching this lesson. The next lesson coming up is going to talk about commas, using commas in direct address and introductory elements in our sentences.